today. We're going to look at, the risk factors in South Asians and see what's the same, what's different. Unfortunately, heart disease, stroke, cancer, they're all international diseases, but there are different risk factor profiles. So the team has really put together a wonderful presentation. Tell us more. We'll start off with geography lesson. That's good. Oh, before we
Yeah,
go to
let's go
geography,
back to the geography. So, what is even South Asian? You can see it's a general term to refer to the area of South Asia, but some of the countries and some of the ethnicities are Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka. Those are some of the big ethnicities in the analysis of cardiovascular research papers. We're going to talk about some of those individual risk factors as well, some of the risk ratios, but before we go into the depth of the conversation, we want to remind everyone February is push up challenge month, and it's not just the push ups. If somebody has difficulty doing push ups, you can also do squats, you can do knee push ups, you can do wall push up, all sorts of things. This is for mental health awareness. It's being done by the Push for Better organization. They have an app. It's called Push for Better. You can download this app. You can join our team. Our team name is called Curnew Athletes in yellow on your screen. So if anybody wants for a challenge, you can join us. Most people can do this. People can do body weights. So they made it very user friendly. A lot of people can join. Also, a fun fact about body squats, there's a study done in April 2024 showing that in an 8-hour window, people who did body squats every 45 minutes, 10 body squats, they lowered their blood sugar more than a single session of a 30-minute walk, which was interesting. Now, uh, it's something similar to exercise snacks, right? Getting up, moving throughout the day, doing a few push-ups, doing a few squats can go a long way. For people with diabetes, it can help a little bit. And Dr. Curnew, you have your CGM. Maybe you can try it next time and let us know the averages. Try it for a week and let us know.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I just have one more week, and then on Saturday I can get back to exercising. So I did a little bit of cross-country walking on the weekend. Got my hip a little bit sore, but that's okay. And I had cataract surgery, so I have to be quiet till Saturday. Then it's back to the gym, and I'm going to start my push-ups a little behind schedule, but look forward to that. And thank you for sharing that. So hope and push-up is actually one of those exercises that's really important especially as we get older. It's a crucial factor for getting up, moving, being able to carry grandkids and preventing falls and things. So it's a crucial exercise. And one of the things is you're right. If every time you after you eat is that you can lower your blood sugar by exercise, and this you can lower your blood sugar better with push-ups than for a walk. Is that right, Rad?
Yep, according to this study, I think I had 10 or so people, not a lot, but reasonable.
And what they do again? They did 10.
So in an 8.5 hour window, they had two groups. One walked for 30 minutes, regular pace, and the other group every 45 minutes, 10 body squats, but full body squats, not 45 degrees, going all the way down. You can see in the picture. And they measured their average blood glucose measurements, and it was slightly lower on average in the squat group than the walk group. But the caveat was you have to do the squat regularly as opposed to the 130 minute. Maybe time wise also saves a bit of time to do squats. So
And even better, do both.
yep,
So
absolutely. Why not both? It's never either or, of course. Like resistance training and aerobic training, it's never either or, but it's both, of course.
And I just reading about what happens to your body as you get older. So as you get older, one of the things is the heart stiffens up, it loses the elasticity. And they looked at these lifelong exercises, people in their 70s and 80s who exercise vigorously every day, and their bodies are quite a bit younger, and since their heart are contracting better. So after 70 years of age, it's hard to for your body to adapt to these changes. So start now, start often, and as you get older, it just gets harder. So don't wait, don't wait. So join us for this Olympic challenge, and this is the either the squat one, or if you want to call this the push-ups, or do both. So
Yeah. You mentioned Olympic. I forgot to mention for people who are into the reason this is Olympics, for people who are interested, you get points for doing these, and we have prizes at the end of the Olympics It's probably going to end up in the summertime, but you get points. Right now we have 10 people participating. We're going to have a leaderboard soon. So if you want some extrinsic motivation, you have that as well.
Fantastic.
All right.
All right.
Now, Naya, you prepared a quiz for us. Dr. Curnew is going to you're going to be put to the test on today's topic. Take it away, Naya.
All right, thank you. So, the first question we have is, South Asians have a higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes at lower BMI levels compared to other ethnic groups. So that's true or false?
Unfortunately, that's true.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, do you want to, oh, okay, we can move on to the next question. So the next question is, South Asians have more barriers when it comes to incorporating diet and exercise into their lives.
I think everybody has problems with that. Join the human race. But if I don't know if one has more than the other, I'll have to say it's hard for everybody.
Yeah. Well, we actually put this as true, and we are going to talk about this a little bit later in the webinar, so we can come back to this. Maybe at the end of this, you might have a different answer, but we'll see. The next question is, South Asians have a higher Lp(a) compared to other ethnicities.
So I got a question for you guys. What population has the highest Lp(a)? You know? Turns out the black population,
I was
people
going to say Africa, yeah.
have the highest Lp(a)s, and I think South Asians have a high Lp(a) as well, a higher one than in many other populations. Tell us more.
That is true, yeah. All right, and another question for you is, are South Asians likely to be genetically predisposed to dyslipidemia?
We talked about higher incidence of diabetes, so they usually have a higher triglyceride, low HDL. They have an atherogenic profile based on remnant triglycerides and low HDL as their predominantly risk factor. And one of the things to think about is that we, these norms we set for waist circumference, body mass index, need to be recalibrated to different South Asian populations. They're also going to learn is that depending on what part of the world you come from, it's not a uniform distribution. And one of the things to try to sort out how much of this is related to genetic factors, and some of it, how much is related to environmental factors, because some of the countries in the world have a poor social economic class as well that may contribute as well. So yeah, so I think there's lots to understand. So to unpack all this, so I think the lipid profile we worry about is a small dense LDL cholesterol, higher triglycerides, low HDL cholesterol as an important risk factor. Tell us more. What did you find out?
Yeah, so we also said that was true. We are going to talk about this a little bit later in the presentation. And then one final question for you is, a portion of the elevated risk of CVD in South Asians is due to genetics, true or false?
True.
That is also correct. Good job.
Alrighty,
All right.
now, go ahead. Go ahead, Naya.
Okay. Yeah, so now we're just going to talk a little bit about South Asians in Canada. So there are quite a few South Asians in Canada. It's a pretty spread out ethnicity all across the world. You can see a little bit here on this diagram.
Could you go back a little bit and just talk about the different, we can talk about the different areas of risk factors from different areas of South Asian populations at all?
Yes. Not a
Okay.
map, but we have some information.
Okay. So one of the things to always think about is that you need a geography lesson to figure some of this stuff out over here. And I think, someone coming from China might be different than coming from Sri Lanka, for instance. And we're going to learn more about that. Tell us more. Keep going. Yep.
Yeah, so the South Asian population has nearly quadrupled over the 25-year period from 1996 to 2021. So especially in Canada, we can see the size of the South Asian immigrant population has grown a lot. So that is why we are covering this topic, because there is such a huge proportion of South Asians living in Canada. So this is an important thing to talk about.
Of course. Now, coming back to geography and maps, if you can look at this slide right here, this was a summary of all the research papers that has been done on South Asian cardiovascular risk burden. And you can see how, if you count all the dots, the studies are from every corner of the globe. Maybe not corners, some in the center, Europe, etc. But it's variable. But all around, all of them found that the risk of South Asians compared to other ethnicities were higher. Now, You can see it geographically. We're going to talk about some of those sub-ethnicities and what the risks are for diabetes, for events, for heart attacks, etc. in a bit as well. Now, on top of that, something that's also noteworthy is that the South Asian population as a whole, now much of that would be India and Pakistan, 23% of the global population, yet when you look at clinical trials, they're underrepresented, right? In clinical trials, 3.3%. In genetic study participants, 1.3%. So this is part of the issue, and we're going to talk about why some of the risk scores for cardiovascular disease underestimates the risk of some ethnicities, including South Asians. And this is part of the solution. Here are some numbers. Now, comparing South Asian men and women to Caucasian ethnicities, you can see some of the numbers here that coronary artery disease mortality from 1979 to 1993 is higher in the South Asian ethnicities. Now, take the numbers with a grain of salt. I don't have the p-values in the here, but you can see the risk is a little bit higher. And this is from data from Canada as well. One thing to note, I also think this was done from McMaster. We are from Hamilton. We have McMaster, highly cited McMaster paper as well. I just wanted to say that as well. All right. Now, one thing that's very interesting, in the UK Biobank, researchers in 2021, they looked at around 500,000 people. And the name of the article was Quantifying and Understanding the Higher Risk of ASCVD Among South Asian Individuals. Now, ASCVD is a disease from blocked arteries, for reference. And they compared around 8,000 South Asians to around 450,000 European ancestries, following up for 11 years. And you can see the diagram on the right. The risk, the unadjusted risk was around twofold. Right? So twofold for cardiovascular disease, South Asian versus European. However, these researchers were pretty smart, and they looked at some of these variables that might explain this variance. Variance meaning what else can explain this twofold increase, and they looked at all the other traditional risk factors. You can see on the right, a little bit smaller, hypertension, diabetes, and you can see as they added these traditional risk factors and also some of the non-traditional like socioeconomic measures, the risk is getting less and less, getting closer to the European data set. Now, essentially what this means is part of the traditional and non-traditional risk factor explains the increased risk of South Asian. However, on top of that, the residual risk is still around 1.45, 45% extra risk after accounting for those things, right? So this just gives you a little bit more of a precise risk factor when we adjust for the both the traditional and the non-traditional risk factors. Alrighty, now talking about social determinants of health, they looked at immigration status. You can see in the red box at the bottom, they compared, and this is the same UK Biobank, those who were South Asian born in the UK. You can see in the blue box, that's a 6.8% number. South Asians born abroad but came to the UK greater than 5 years. And South Asians who had immigrated to the UK less than 5 years, so recent immigrants. And you can see as the immigration status becomes more recent, the risk of diabetes went higher. You can see that 7-fold difference as compared to a European-born UK. Now, part of it could be due to environmental factors. Part of it is the genetics. Takeaway from this is things like social determinants of health, being an immigrant or not. Those things are also factored in. The lifestyle changes that we can see that are different, the dietary patterns that are different. In the South Asian culture as well. Speaking of diet, this UK Biobank also looked at dietary patterns, and they saw that dietary pattern alone did not explain the increased risk. You can see to the right that the dietary patterns in their subset of cohort, it was fairly the same. You can see the bar graphs, they're pretty much the same height. Meaning there's also other factors at play. The genetics that we're going to mention, the diabetes risk, and what the biology tells us. Speaking of biology, let's quickly talk about what even cardiovascular disease is. Dr. Curnew, you have a lot of insight on this. Atherosclerosis, a 40-year or 50-year story. I'll pass it off to Natalia. Go ahead.
Yeah, so so two of the main reasons behind the development and progression of cardiovascular disease is inflammation and endothelial dysfunction. So the development of atherosclerotic plaque is mainly due to inflammation that occurs in the intima, which is the innermost layer of the blood vessel. This causes an increase in adhesion molecules, which allow more leukocytes and other cells to attach to that initial atherosclerotic plaque. This in turn recruits more inflammatory cells, resulting in a greater plaque that continues to grow. Additionally, low density lipoprotein gets oxidized throughout this process, which leads to even more inflammation. So we can see how inflammation really is that driving force in this process. And at the end of it, two main things occur. So the first thing is an arterial stenosis, which simply means that the plaque got so big that the arteries clogged and narrow, leading to reduced blood flow. The second one is that due to these plaque deposits developing, they eventually can rupture, leading to platelets coming to that plaque site, creating a blood clot, which is what a thrombosis is, ultimately blocking the vessel. And then from both of these, the blockage can lead to a heart attack or a stroke or many other complications. Secondly, we have endothelial dysfunction, which leads to a type of non-obstructive coronary artery disease that is more prevalent in women, where the narrowing of the blood vessels isn't necessarily caused by atherosclerotic plaque, but because of the endothelium not working properly. Also, even with atherosclerosis, endothelial dysfunction also occurs. This is kind of just like an additional aspect to it. So endothelial dysfunction, can be a result of either insufficient nitric oxide being produced or a decreased sensitivity of the nitric oxide cells. So endothelial cells to nitric oxide. Yeah. So as we're talking about nitric oxide in relation to women, so nitric oxide is a key regulator in healthy endothelial function, as nitric oxide widens blood vessels by relaxing the inner muscles of the blood vessel, which lowers blood pressure and increases blood flow. So when we're looking at women specifically, you may have heard how younger women may have less cardiovascular problems compared to younger men, or how after menopause, women are more susceptible to cardiovascular respiratories. So one of the kind of hypotheses and reasons for this is actually estrogen, as it increases endothelial nitric oxide synthesis. So by increasing the nitric oxide in the endothelium, it increases the ability to have our blood vessels widen, increasing blood flow.
Kind of interesting. If you just backtrack to that slide there. So one of the things is that women develop heart disease on average 10 years later compared to males. And one of the differences is that this estrogen effect. So early in my career, I used to prescribe estrogens, hormone replacement therapy, to prevent a heart attack. You mentioned the estrogens causes vasodilatation, increases nitric oxide production, which we think are good things. But then we found out that giving estrogens to women well after the menopause increases the risk of a heart attack or stroke. And we found out is that estrogens also causes thrombosis, blood clots, to take place as well. And so you need to really properly design trials. And right now, this is a controversial area in some people's mind. Women 10 years after the menopause, if you give them estrogens, you'll kill them. You'll cause more breast cancer, more heart attacks, more strokes. And that was really as a surprise. Giving estrogens around the time of the menopause may be a protective effect, but we really don't know this. So to me, I'm afraid of estrogens in the sense of around menopause at that point in time. So I think we need to have further studies in this area. We don't have big, large randomized trials of estrogens around the time of menopause. So if women want to choose estrogens to have, better skin protection, I'm not for that. If one wants to take estrogens because they're having severe flushing, intractable symptoms, giving it for the shortest period of time may be something to be considered. But I can't come out and say that estrogens giving to women after menopause protects. Well after menopause, it causes harm. Now, if you can backtrack one more slide there, Rad, this is actually kind of interesting as well. People tell me, well, is heart disease reversible? Picture A is reversible. That's a fatty streak. That's somebody in their 20s or the age of 15. And plaque B could be a very thick, fibrous plaque, could be a very stable lesion that may be 80% blocked. And if you go for an angioplasty to that lesion, you convert that B lesion to a C lesion, you crack it open, um, you cause thrombus and blood clots. So the situation is really quite complex in the sense that the best way to treat atherosclerosis is to be closer to A. And the mistake I think we're making is that we're waiting too late. If you're going to wait till your 50s and 60s and 70s, still a good thing to treat. But starting treatment in your 20s, when you have earlier disease where we can actually do something about that, that picture C or B, we can't reverse this heart disease. This is well advanced plaque. There's no Drano, there's no surgical procedure that's going to cure this disease. It's a lifelong disease, and you're absolutely right. So think about how to protect your vessels. We do things like stress tests, and it looks at severity of blocked arteries, but doesn't tell you if the plaque's going to rupture or not. And we don't really have good technology yet readily available to help us look at that. So look at those vessels, and we can help you look at them a little bit more deeper. But wouldn't it be more important just to treat the disease early in life and a lifetime disease so you do better? We can advance a few more slides there. So there's no Drano, there's no good operations to get rid of this process. Let's talk about differences between males and females in cardiovascular disease. Tell us more.
Yes. Sorry. So there's also three other main kind of reasons why there's a difference between cardiovascular disease in men versus in women. So one of them is that women are more susceptible to having autoimmune disease. So this can be attributed to differences in the microvasculature between men and women, predisposing women with an autoimmune disease to be more likely to develop atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, actually. And then another factor is that women are more likely to have heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, unlike men who are more prone to have heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. And it is important to note that heart failure as a result of preserved ejection fraction results in greater endothelial inflammation and a decrease in nitric oxide bioavailability. However, the pathophysiology is still not very well researched. And then the third is that women have lower hemoglobin levels, which leads to an increase in endothelial and microvascular dysfunction, which, as discussed, both play a role in cardiovascular disease.
Well, it's kind of interesting what you show, if you just go backtrack one more time, is that you mentioned inflammation is a very powerful stimulant to blocked arteries, and these inflammatory disease process, rheumatoid arthritis. The other thing too is that any virus or bacteria, people get pneumococcal pneumonia, influenza, people get COVID. They're all inflammatory. Being overweight is inflammatory. So these are things that you can make some differences. That's why I'm getting my vaccines, not so much so I don't get COVID or I don't get influenza. These are important things not to get or not to get too sick, but will these things accelerate atherosclerosis? We know that people after these infections are really more likely to have a heart attack in the first couple months. We know that, for instance, COVID likes atherosclerotic plaque, and so I worry about the long-term effects. Interesting. Pregnancy. If women who have complications during pregnancy, and we have some videos about this, is that during pregnancy is that the baby always steals from mom. So and it can be a stress factor for mom. And so if you get diabetes during pregnancy, it goes away after pregnancy for the mother, but that means you're going to have diabetes later in life. If you have high blood pressure during pregnancy, or if you gain too much weight during pregnancy, these are all features that put you at higher risk for a heart attack or stroke. So having diabetes during pregnancy, it goes away, will come back later in life. Having hypertension or high blood pressure during pregnancy increases your risk of future heart attacks or strokes. Preeclampsia, eclampsia, more severe diseases of pregnancy. Just so these are things that are important factors to look at that. And there are many differences. And yeah, I didn't realize till recently that there's a huge difference, there's a difference in hemoglobin. And women struggle more with iron deficiency because of menstrual blood losses compared to males. And getting adequate iron is actually important for the life of everybody, especially for women. Having a ferritin level above 50 should be the norm right now. Our norms were too low before. So ferritin is a marker for iron. And everybody should know their ferritin level, make sure it's in the right range, but somewhere around 50 or greater is closer to ideal. And I bet you most young women don't have an iron or ferritin that high level, so we need to work hard at that. I just had some pumpkin seeds right now, which is rich in iron in my in my vegetarian chili dish I just had there, and added some spinach too, but and other different good micronutrients as well. So you should too. And we have a great video, by the way, on vitamins and micronutrients. So I'm trying to get most of my vitamins and things through micronutrients. Mother Nature has a secret formula. Tell us more.
So one of the risk factors for cardiovascular disease we're going to be looking at is dyslipidemia. All right, dyslipidemia is what we refer to as abnormal levels of lipid in the bloodstream, becoming a risk for cardiovascular disease. So high levels of low density lipids, which is commonly referred to as bad cholesterol, and then triglycerides, which is the most common type of fat. So when we have high levels of that and then low levels of high density lipids, which is commonly referred to as good cholesterol, but it's important to note that it's not always good. Those are the markers to dyslipidemia. So if you look at the diagram on the right, you can see that the high levels of LDL and triglyceride caused formation of plaque, and that restricted the blood flow. So to better define and understand how it manifests, we have to realize that there are two types of dyslipidemia, primary and secondary. So primary dyslipidemia occurs due to genetic mutations and genetic predisposition. And then secondary dyslipidemia occurs as a side effect to other diseases like diabetes and liver disease. And then also lifestyle factors like obesity and diet. So like our high cholesterol diet or high sugar diets that South Asians tend to eat. So we can look at dyslipidemia and its manifestation kind of like a traffic jam. So imagine a highway with smooth moving traffic and the ambulance can easily pass through it and reach its destination on time. So that's kind of what a healthy blood vessel is like, where the highway is the vessel, the cars are the lipids, and the ambulance is the blood circulating the body. However, if we start increasing the traffic, the roads become packed and the ambulance is stuck and it can't reach its destination as quick. So this is basically what happens in simplified terms when there are abnormal levels of LDL and triglyceride in the body causing dyslipidemia. So one of the most common dyslipidemia in South Asians is low high density lipid C and high triglycerides, which is referred to as hypertriglyceridemia. So the rate of triglyceridemia has shown to be higher in South Asians compared to Caucasians in several studies. It was observed in up to 70% of South Asian populations, in which 36% was found in women. This is compared with 34% in Caucasians. So this statistics of incidence shows how important it is to understand the presence this problem has on South Asian populations, especially the women.
Righty. This is on top of what you just said. So hypertriglyceridemia is very common. You can see some of the facts at the top that South Asians, 25% of the world population, yet according to the study that we found, around half of the global cardiovascular deaths. Now, I'm not sure if the data 50% is exactly accurate, but the predominant number of cardiovascular death occurs in that population due to a variety of reasons. Dr. Curnew, you mentioned if we have a diagram of risk factors of the risk factors on a map. Now we have it here, LP little a. You can see LP little a in the North American population, Canadians, Americans, also other ethnicities as well, but by and large, it's about 1 in 5, 20%. Now you go to the right, you go to the east, you can see that red area, South Asia, is about 25%, 1 in 4. Africa is around 30%, so 1 in 3, and that's why you mentioned that LP little a is highest in the African continent. And you can also see on the left, this study is the same UK biobank we mentioned, that average LP little a levels in South Asians is higher than the European counterparts now. So this is Another independent risk factors on top of the other risk factors that some people might have heard about: smoking, hypertension, LDL itself, obesity, which we're going to talk about, diabetes. LPLA is an independent risk factor that is higher in the South Asian ethnicity. Obesity. Let's talk about obesity and the genetics of it for South Asians. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so with obesity, how does obesity occur? So there's actually like a bunch of different reasons. So number one, it's your excess calorie intake. So that means you're consuming more calories than your body needs. That's usually like in the form of high fat foods, high sugar, and like processed foods. And then reduced energy expenditure basically is just like living a sedentary lifestyle and having a lower basal metabolic rate, which means like you're not burning a lot of calories, just like doing the things that your body needs to survive, like breathing and like circulating blood. And then a chronic energy imbalance is, again, when your caloric intake is exceeding your caloric burn, what can happen is you develop a sort of leptin resistance. And leptin is a hormone which makes you feel full. So if you're feeling resistant to that, it means that you're just going to like continue eating and continue feeling hungry. Another reason could be a fat accumulation in your adipose tissue. So that's when your excess energy is just stored as fat, is stored as triglycerides in your fat cells. And then that's what causes like the fat, the subcutaneous fat to develop, and also the visceral fat, which is particularly harmful and we'll like go into depth into later. And hormonal and metabolic changes can also contribute to obesity. So that includes like insulin resistance as well as cortisol, which is a stress hormone. That can promote further fat storage. And then again, disruptions in another hormone called ghrelin, which is your hunger hormone, can lead to the development of obesity. So why are South Asians more prone to obesity? So it can be a variety of reasons that ranges from genetic factors to fat distribution, having a lower BMI threshold overall, and just like generally lifestyle and their diet. So when it comes to genetic factors, there's something called the thrifty genotype hypothesis. So that means that South Asians store fat more efficiently due to an ancestral adaptation to food scarcity. So you're going to have more fat accumulation at lower body mass index levels, even in modern environments. And so what happened was this thrifty trait basically used to help these like South Asian populations survive by conserving their energy as fat during times of famine. But we don't really need it anymore. So that's why now it's contributing more towards obesity and the development of diabetes. And then your South Asians also have lower lean muscle mass. So compared to other populations, they have less skeletal muscle, which leads to a lower basal metabolic rate, as I mentioned earlier. And South Asians also have higher insulin resistance. So even at normal BMIs, South Asians tend to develop insulin resistance, which increases the risk of type 2 diabetes and weight gain. Yeah, so in this study, there's two key findings that's related to cardiovascular disease in South Asians. So first, South Asians tend to have higher waist to hip ratios. So this leads to the characteristic apple-shaped obesity, which you can see on the bottom right there. This shape is due to central adiposity. So that's where your visceral fat accumulates around your internal organs. And then another thing they found is that the fat distribution patterns are going to vary across different ethnicities and nationalities. So as a result, conditions like diabetes can occur even in individuals who appear thin, and that phenomenon is less commonly observed in Western populations. And then this figure, it just highlights that even small increases in your visceral adipose tissue, which is again that fat around your organs, that central fat that you have, can be reflected by your BMI and waist circumference, and it can significantly raise the risk of cardiovascular disease. So basically, this central adipose tissue, the central fat distribution, plays a big role in cardiovascular risk. So it's not just your overall body weight we're looking at like the distribution of that body weight and that fat that contributes to obesity. And then a lower BMI threshold. So an important consideration when you're assessing when you're assessing cardiovascular disease and diabetes risk in South Asians is that they develop these conditions at lower BMI levels compared to other populations. So the Western BMI cutoff for obesity is around 30, whereas for South Asians, it's 27.5. This is because South Asians can develop heart disease and diabetes at BMI levels that are considered like normal for other populations. However, BMI itself isn't always an accurate test because it does not distinguish between muscle and fat. So this means that a muscular person could have a high BMI, but a low body fat, and also ignores fat distribution, as I mentioned earlier, which is critical because visceral fat around the organs has much higher health risks than just that subcutaneous fat. That's why a better way to measure like obesity levels is this waist to hip ratio. It's calculated, we can see the calculation there. And for women at risk, it's if you have a waist to hip ratio of greater than 0.85, and for men, it's having a waist to hip ratio of greater than 0.9. So this is a very strong predictor of metabolic and heart disease risk because it reflects the harmful central adipose tissue more accurately than BMI.
All right, next we're going to talk about type 2 diabetes. So type 2 diabetes is a chronic condition where the body either becomes resistant to insulin or doesn't produce enough, which leads to high blood sugar levels or hyperglycemia. Yeah, thanks. So there are two causes for type 2 diabetes, or two like pathways for it to occur. So the first one that we're going to talk about is insulin resistance, and then we'll talk about pancreatic beta cell dysfunction. Can you just go back? Can you go back one? I think we missed the, yeah, there we go. So just briefly, what is insulin resistance? It's basically when cells in the body don't respond well to insulin, which makes it difficult for them to take up glucose, and then that increases blood glucose levels. So the other one is beta cell dysfunction. So the beta cells are the cells in the pancreas that produce and secrete insulin. So when there's dysfunction in these cells, it results in less insulin in the blood, which results in higher levels of blood glucose. Whether or not they have diabetes, South Asians tend to have higher baseline insulin levels and produce more insulin in response to food. So basically, they need more insulin to keep at a normal blood glucose level, and then they also just secrete more insulin when they eat food in general. The prevalence of type 2 diabetes is very high in South Asian immigrants. You can see in this table there is a list of prevalence divided by country. So these are all South Asian countries. And the very last one is non-immigrants. So as we can see, it can be up to more than 2 times as high in certain South Asian immigrants compared to non-immigrants. And all South Asian immigrants have a much higher prevalence of type 2 diabetes. They also have a higher prevalence of insulin resistance. So that is another thing that is different in the immigrant population. Something that's interesting is that if they were to stay in the countries where they immigrated from, they would actually have a higher rate of diabetes than what we see in immigrants in Canada. So it's possible that migration is a protective factor against diabetes, but it is also still higher rates of diabetes seen in immigrants that are from South Asian descent. So diabetes is nearly 4 times more common in South Asians compared to Europeans, which you can see in this first graph over here. South Asians also more often develop diabetes without obesity, as we talked about earlier, and they have a higher prevalence of uncontrolled diabetes. So the next thing we're going to talk about is severe insulin-deficient diabetes, or SID, which is a type of type 2 diabetes where there's a significant lack of insulin production due to beta cell dysfunction. This has been found to have a higher occurrence in South Asians. So why exactly is diabetes bad for your heart? Well, it can cause heart disease, so structural and functional heart changes, which can increase the risk of heart failure. These include increased cardiac mass, impaired diastolic and systolic function, and fibrosis, and this can occur even without coronary artery disease. So
So
another thing that
let's backtrack one second. Kind of interesting is that one of the things as we age, we get more fibrosis, more loss of elasticity. It's a part of a process of aging. But one of the ways that we get this is through blood sugar. And people that have metabolic syndrome, higher blood sugars, have an acceleration of this process there. And I think, keeping track of blood sugars over a lifetime is kind of important as well. So, you remind me that diabetes accelerates aging. Makes, we worry about, wrinkles in our skin. I don't care much about wrinkles in my skin. I care about wrinkles in my heart and my blood vessels. So knowing that your blood sugar, knowing that you're metabolically strong is really important. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. So the next thing we're going to talk about is cardiovascular autonomic neuropathy. So essentially this occurs in diabetes because you have long-term uncontrolled blood sugar levels, and this can cause issues with your heart, such as resting tachycardia, postural hypotension, exercise intolerance, and more. This increases the 5-year mortality rate from cardiovascular disease as well. The next thing is myocardial infarction. So this is actually a major risk factor for the development of coronary artery disease, diabetes. So diabetic patients actually have a 50% higher 1-year incidence of MI. This is likely due to more blood clots.
Now we'll be talking about prevention and management of cardiovascular disease. So when analyzing traditional risk scores within cardiovascular health, they have inadequately reflect the increased risk among the South Asian population. Thus, the national guidelines, such as American College of Cardiology for primary prevention of cardiovascular diseases, the European Society of Cardiology for dyslipidemia management, and the Canadian Cardiovascular Society for dyslipidemia management have adapted a new risk score to address the increased risk factor for people of South Asian ancestry. So when comparing between general populations, the Indians and Bangladeshis are 1.3 more likely to have cardiovascular disease, and this is higher for Pakistanis by 1.7. Due to this overlap of ancestry and cardiovascular disease, there's new guidelines that recommend lipid screening before 40 years of age among the South Asian population. So a known way to manage cardiovascular disease is through your diet. So changes in lifestyle, like an altered diet, can help reverse dyslipidemia. South Asians should alter their diets to lower their LDLs, triglycerides, and non-HDL levels, and increase their HDL levels, as well as reduce their blood pressure, inflammation, and oxidative stress, which all contribute to cardiovascular disease. This can be obtained by reducing intake of saturated and trans fats, cholesterol, and refined carbohydrates, and then increasing these intakes of unsaturated fats, fiber, plant sterols, and antioxidants. For example, in a previous webinar, we talked about Mediterranean-inspired meals, such as quinoa bowl with grilled salmon or a lentil salad.
I also want to pause here because we have some presenters who are of South Asian descent, maybe more familiar with some of these foods on the screen. Can you guys tell us about some of the healthier versions of these, some of the unhealthier versions of these? I see ghee there, and I don't think that's the healthiest option.
Yeah, I can jump in. So essentially a lot of our food that we cook has a lot of like creams and butters, and like we said, ghee is over there. And personally, my family cooks with a lot of olive oil. So that's something that I think we can work on a little bit. But if we wanted to replace that with healthier options, we do have a lot of lentils. So lentils are a pretty healthy option. We could do more vegetable dishes, and we can focus more on like barbecued chicken dishes rather than really heavy curry and like creamy dishes.
So
I would also,
go ahead.
I would also like to add on, like even the proportion sizes. I learned in school, like it's supposed to be like a palm size of like one serving of rice. And if you look at a plate of food, it's usually half rice or like half carbohydrates, and then another quarter of vegetables and another quarter of protein. But like if we redistribute of what we're eating proportion wise, so like a quarter of rice or a quarter of carbs, and replacing that with more vegetables or more vegetable curries, is will definitely be will help with reducing the unnecessary levels of carbohydrates we have in our diet.
So I'm looking at this over here. This is a killing diet. You know, pure ghee, grass-fed. It's basically going right into your arteries, causes oxidation, destroys them. That white bread on the thing, it's simple white sugar. White flour is basically going to cause diabetes. So to me is that today I'm using my my Libre machine, looking at my blood sugars. So today I just had I had some brownie. My sugar spiked up. And so you really have to, I think the beans and the lentils are great. Those creamy sauces may not cause your blood sugar to spike, but they cause your waist to spike. So to me, creams and so more tomatoes, more vegetables, uh, all the white foods, all the white sugar, white flour. I'm sorry, white rice is just a killing rice. Is that so? To me, is that really thinking about you know how to change all this? And this food looks delicious, but wondering why there's so much diabetes. I'm looking at most of these foods here. I can see why. So there's healthier versions, and we'll put on our screen. We'll do some more webinars on how to convert these things into healthier versions. I've seen so many people say that there's something magical about ghee. Something magical magically goes into your arteries and destroys them before you have to. So I love lentils. It's a wonderful food. It's just having nuts and seeds and all sorts of vegetables. The Canadian Food Guide says half your plate is vegetables. I don't see half a plate of vegetables here. And sure, I love carbohydrates. I mean, they're my favorite food, but it's killing me. And I hope it don't let it kill you either. So if you don't like somebody, feed them rice. And if you like them, go to quinoa and go to more vegetables and konjac noodles and lots of change here. Any comment from anybody else?
Maybe I can add on. Well, I'm not from South Asia, but close. I'm from Iran, and our diet very similar. Lots of rice, lots of the unhealthy things. And some of the things we mentioned of how to make these healthier, one with portion size. So if you're going to have it, and we have a slide after coming up, how difficult it is, because diet is a part of lifestyle. For some people, it's not a realistic goal to completely get rid of it, but mixing things up, more vegetables. If you're going to have rice dishes, having less of it, half rice, half vegetables, having it less times in a week, those kinds of adjustments can be made, and that hits close to home. Or also we're trying to make that adjustment at home, where adding more vegetables, less rice, less bread, as you said, Dr. Curnew. Those are all good suggestions.
So white rice, white potatoes are killing foods. So go to the whole grain, whole wheat parts of them, and but eat less of them. So I'm trying to bulk up on more protein, more fiber, more vegetables. It's not the world, it's not as appetizing as this food here, but you live longer and better.
Of course. Now, the next slide I mentioned, it was this one. So this was a randomized trial done in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken, of trying to see if you can have a South Asian patient population, if you can provide them with some ideas of how to change these dishes to healthier alternatives. You can see the table on the left. They suggest changing the salt to some salt substitutes. Now, some of the right ones. Reading nutritional labels to pick healthier versions of, of foods. Some of the sauces that we mentioned, you can see the butter chicken sauces in stores. Now that's processed food because it's packaged. People can make it themselves. A healthier version of it, less fat, less sodium. But you can see some of the ideas here. And the sociocultural parts of it, you can see some examples on the right where you have dietary principles. Someone mentions for your cholesterol, use ginger, black pepper, garlic, right? Those are some common sentiments that you have. Religion and its impact on food and communal events, right? You can see some examples here. Auntie brings in food and it's so much sweets and you have to eat it. And also some cultures where it's rude to not finish your plate, right? Now that'll be a one-off event. You're invited somewhere. It's probably not going to kill you, but it's more of the habits, right? The lifestyle that you can see that can be challenging, but we can make them healthier. Now, vitamin E, exercise. This is the other practical recommendation. Delangshi, tell us about this.
Yeah, living an active lifestyle can help manage cardiovascular disease. However, among South Asian women, they face specific barriers that can make it inaccessible to exercise. So often there's a cultural norm where that women are meant to focus on their traditional household duties, and thus they might have to prioritize their family responsibilities over their own health. So family doctors should stress to women their imperative nature of exercise and how this will favor them long-term management. This includes like small interval movements that could be done at home or for medium periods of time. But the goal is for them to move for 150 minutes of vigorous exercise a week, or even just using small weights. They can suggest women only spaces within gyms to help South Asian women feel more comfortable with the idea of exercise outside the home.
And exercise snacks, right? That idea of squats, they can lower your blood sugar, doing push-ups, doing knee push-ups, all kinds of exercises that people can do at home. Actually, recently, something I did to get my family started, I bought an indoor bike for $70, and I've had people starting using it. Now that's a start. I want to encourage more resistance training, but to build a little bit of that aerobic base is helpful as well. Having an indoor bike at home, especially in the Canadian winter, it just goes to show that if somebody's serious about living longer and healthier, you can adjust things. Yes, Dr. Curnew mentioned barriers exist. Everybody has barriers, some more than others. But if we can try to work together, some of the examples you mentioned are good. Different gym spaces, different community centers and exercise centers are also contributed to that aid overall.
So I'm going to say this is a good starting point. I was just listening to a webinar by Dr. Ben Levine's Prescription for Life Weekly Routine. So he suggests 1 hour of moderate aerobic activity. It can be running, biking, dancing. 1 hour of fun activity, 30 minutes of high intensity exercise. This is something called the Norwegian 4x4. So this is tough. You basically do maximum intensity for 4 minutes, rest for 4 minutes, and do that 4 to 10 times. That's a lot. 2 to 3 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise, including strength training, and then 2 sessions of strength training and balance training. So to me, what I'm trying to do is somewhere between 6 to 14 hours of serious activity a week. It has to be fun, has to be enjoyable. And this, is that starting to walk is a good thing, and doing 130 minutes of vigorous activity is a starting point. But if you're really serious about your health, you got to do more and make that to a better part of your life, I think. So sorry about that. But I think especially as you get older, if you want to age well, again, right now, 25% of Canadians end up in the nursing home. And most of us don't want to get to that place. And, the last 2 to 10 years of your life is often spent with disability. I think this has been so underemphasized and underperformed by everyone, is that your quality, if you want to look at a healthy 80-year-old, they're doing more than just walking. And if it's the winter's too cold, I'm too sore, then you're going to have diabetes. You're going to have many cancers, many heart disease. You can have more falls. You're going to end up with more fractures and more Alzheimer's disease. So I don't want that for you. I don't want that for me. So we have our Olympics challenge this month. It's push-up month or squat month, whatever you want to do. Please make this a prior in your life. And if you're saying you don't have the time, I get it. So you won't have time for exercise, and you have time for illness and sickness and diabetes, metabolic syndrome, heart disease, stroke, atrial fibrillation, arthritis, Alzheimer's disease, poor quality of life, depression, and about 7 to 10 different cancers. These are our choices. And this is so important. You're not gonna start off doing all these things. Exercise is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So undervalued, and especially as one gets older. We talk about inflammation. The best anti-inflammatory drug I know on the planet is vitamin E, vitamin exercise. So and you need a good dose of it. And that way you can go eat some bad food afterwards, because you'll have more muscle mass. You'll have more, we just learned that South Asians have less muscle. You build more muscle, you can eat more bad food. I love food. I'm always hungry for food. And so I need to cheat a lot. And by building muscle, you can cheat more and live better. But as I get older, I can't do that anymore, because my blood sugar goes up too much. So looking at a brownie causes my blood sugar to go up. So I just don't want that for you either.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for sharing that, Dr. Curnew. It's a well put. Something I thought of when you were talking about this. I recently came across this application on phone. Now, this is more for the younger demographic, but essentially what it did was you could not use some of the major apps on your phone, like YouTube, social media, internet, unless you logged in some exercise in the exercise apps, right? So that was interesting. Essentially, you're forced to go on a bike, run, resistance train, whatever, to have access to those applications. Again, if anybody's interested, please look that up. Again, that's more of a tactic and work for some people, and not for the majority of us, because one of the factors you mentioned is a marathon. Can you keep that going? Yes, it's a fun challenge, but it's a marathon. It's a decade-long process, multiple decades for most people.
I can run a marathon. It just takes me forever. And some guy taps me on the shoulder saying, "You're in last place, sir." I'm still going. At least I'm out there. And I hope you're out there too as well.
Of course. Alrighty. Reminder of weight loss. We mentioned obesity and diabetes. I just want to put this slide again here and reiterate the point that the direct trial published in 2018 found that losing 20 to 30 pounds can help put diabetes into remission. So weight loss is a huge factor for many people, but putting a pin on that for people who have South Asian descent, where the diabetes is a little bit different, the cause of it, where you can have it with a lower BMI, with less people without obesity having diabetes, you have to do other things: muscle building, more activity, more movement, trying to change your body composition, so-called recomposition. And there's, I think that Dr. Curnew, correct me if I'm wrong, some of those HIIT exercises and intermittent fasting, we have a video on that helps to move the fat around in your body a little bit, right? So the tactics are a little bit different, but weight loss in general for most people is wonderful. And here's a reminder of that.
One of the things that's important is that the long-term success of this, I think at 5 years, is about 15% or so.
Yeah, 13. It was 13.
I ran off the numbers. Is that it just means that you're going to have to, like any sports franchise. Look, Kansas City won 2 Super Bowls, and they were just blown out of the water by Philadelphia. We're going to have our ups and downs of this. All professional sports franchises strive to get better. We need to strive to get better, or we're going to have ups and downs of this. So there's going to be periods of time where you're going to struggle. I get it. There's going to be times in life where things are going to be difficult, but get back on there and go down fighting on all cylinders. I don't see enough people fighting on all cylinders at this stage of the game, and it's fun. It's fun, these sorts of things, like and you know, we're social creatures, and being around other people doing this, it's a great experience right now. The direct trial was actually reproduced in an Asian population or a skinnier population, and what to put diabetes in remission, you still have to lose weight. Um, and I think, you know, these are important things, is that depending on how you want to define it, somewhere between 50 to 80% of Canadians are overweight. And the vast majority are not metabolically healthier. And you saw that picture, blood sugar getting age causes fibrosis, scar tissues in many organ systems, including your heart. Your heart loses elasticity, and controlling this is actually important. So um, um, I'm enjoying the challenge. Yes, I've had injuries and I'll have setbacks, but I'm going to get up there. And I know you guys can do it too. Everybody can do this.
Yeah, well said, Dr. Curnew, of course. We had the question in the quiz early on, which was, what are some of the barriers to many people, but South Asians specifically? We had this paper published in 2023, and they mentioned a few of them, where more of a recommendation to doctors and other healthcare providers to take these into account when it comes to health education, treatments, etc. And some other ones in the red box right there, you have community engagement, right? Cultural specific dietary recommendations. We had a discussion on that a little while ago, how to make the dishes currently healthier, find alternatives, some of those examples. And one thing I liked specifically was education in specific languages, non-English populations. And actually, there's a study I wanted to show right here, published in the British Medical Journal. They looked at the effect of language spoken at home and how it can have a negative effect when there's this miscommunication or lack thereof between English providers, healthcare providers, English-speaking providers, and non-English speaking patients. So you have that challenge there where there's a bit of a lost opportunity for education and for communication. And so some of the recommendations here that they put was having a diverse staff, right? Having people around that can bridge that gap. Dr. Curnew, you do this a lot. Encouraging family members and friends to join appointments, making a team when it comes to getting healthier, right? And now, in this case, is facilitate translation and interpretive, but also as a support, right? As recommendation for everybody. And we mentioned educational materials and in diverse languages. And also one consideration one of our team members had was connecting female patients to specific exercise centers or other specific providers if that's applicable for them. So just being cognizant of some of these social determinants of health, they mentioned as a tactic to remove the barriers. We mentioned that being an immigrant was associated with more diabetes in South Asians compared to the UK population. So as you can see, that it's not just the biology, it's the environment, it's the public health, it's the governments and what's provided and what's not, what we can do as a team, as a community, and as healthcare providers, as friends, family, patients, everybody together.
I think it's very brave to leave one place of the world to come to somewhere else. I'm very inspired by people who take the chance and put the stress of that to that and strive for better right now. So I take my hats off to anybody uh, who who does that, and I think most of us I really appreciate that. So but change don't pick up all the bad North American habits and leave your old bad habits behind, and let's get to a healthier place. And you know, right now we're all fighting around the world, and we're crazy. There'll probably be a tax on everything, a tariff on some other on everything going on right now. But you know, is that we're lucky to be in a country that gives us opportunity. We have to work for it. We need to get better. And what makes Canada strong is just the diversity. And I hope we really work hard to do this. And I take my hats off to people who try new things. Is that I get annoyed for people who don't try enough. And so just try. Tell us more.
Thanks for that, Dr. Curnew. Also wanted to talk about a video we just put on the channel called All About VASCEPA. VASCEPA is a fish oil that works. That's how we named it. So, Dr. Curnew, you can tell us more about this. But because we mentioned hypertriglyceridemia, bit of a tongue twister, in the South Asian population and other population, this is something to mention. Now, if you're a patient of ours, you probably have received an email called an ocean form if you qualified for this, but I'll leave the rest to Dr. Curnew. You can take a look at this video and learn more about it. Some of the over-counter fish oils, they're not the same. They don't provide the same benefit as to the pure fish oils and isolated EPA that we have here in VASCEPA.
So I think about 3-1-1-1. So I want my cholesterol less than 3. I want my HDL, healthy cholesterol, greater than 1. My number 2, I want my triglycerides less than 1. And I want my lousy cholesterol less than 1. And so the good news is that triglycerides, we saw unhealthy diets, all the white sugars, white flours, all the saturated fats, the creamy sauces, and the extra calories, and the lack of exercise, and alcohol leads to a rise in triglycerides, to metabolic syndrome, and heart disease and stroke. We learned, and well, still controversial, it's becoming less controversial as time goes on. You know, we've been told once that alcohol is good for you. Alcohol is a type 1 carcinogen. If you have a triglyceride problem, it's certainly not good. I try to limit alcohol to special occasions. I'm trying to keep my blood sugar, my weight down, my fats down. And then I go to the lifestyle changes, try to keep my body mass index down to around 23, build muscle, less fat. And pure EPA, VASCEPA, is a prescription medication that costs somewhere near $10 a day if you have a drug plan, or you can get it for about $5 a day. The reason why it's important is that pure EPA is different than the fish oils you get in the over the counter. And this actually lowers risk of heart disease 20 to 25%. So if you have a high triglyceride, and then you might want to consider being on VASCEPA on top of lifestyle changes. Now, I try to eat 4 to 6 fatty fish meals a week, and I try really hard to do all the right things. We talk about these videos on women's health we'll talk about over here. So just take a look at that and see if that's something you want to discuss with myself or any of your doctors, whether or not that fits into your cardiovascular preventive profile.
Of course. Just wanted to end off with the playlist. We have a women's health playlist. Thanks for everybody putting it together. I'm not sure if you mentioned menopause tonight, but that's one of the risk factors. We have a webinar on that. Gestational diabetes and pregnancy is a risk factor. We touched on that. We have videos on that in more depth. And if you want something to sleep with and learn, you can definitely join our webinars and learn something as well.
Yeah, so just to remind people that if you had complications during pregnancy, such as high blood pressure, diabetes, you're at higher risk for heart disease and stroke. And your baby is also at higher risk too as well. We know that baby's health is important. So a baby who doesn't grow properly or grows too much has higher cardiovascular disease in the future. We learned that hormone replacement therapy after the menopause is not protective, it's harmful. The average time of women going through the menopause is around 51. If it's earlier, you're at risk for heart disease, and if you've had hysterectomy with your ovaries taken out, you're at higher risk as too. So there's so many things you can do to change that risk. The first is lifestyle changes. So please look at presentations of heart disease. Women present with more funny chest pains compared to male counterparts. Guys are more easy to understand when it comes to a heart attack. You died, dropped dead, you had a heart attack. It's a classic presentation. Where women present with more funny chest pain, so it makes it harder. Women have probably more something called endothelial dysfunction, small vessel disease, vasospasm. So we're learning a lot about this. We learned a lot. We still have a long ways to go right now. But the backbone to all this is good, healthy lifestyle changes. I hope that helps a bit, and check these out. I think you'll learn more.
All right, of course. Any last thoughts from the presenters? Any insights, especially you want to leave our viewers with?
We'll go back to that first slide where
First
people
slide.
come from. Yeah, look at where your country of origin determines in part some of your risk factors for heart disease and stroke. Part of this is explained to you by coming from a poor country with bad diet. So just being and part of it's explained by genetic factors. We learned that Lp(a) is higher in people of South Asian backgrounds. We also know that triglycerides are higher. We also know that some of the lifestyle changes aren't as great either. So there's so much to do. So I hope you take a look at this. And we do have some webinars on our diet effects about how to eat healthier. If you look at our microgreen webinar, we did some cultural sensitive meals, and boy, we had some really good meals of Asian background there. So I hope you check that out there and take a look at that. We'll do more of these webinars on how to cook better for different populations. So if you have any wonderful recipes, helps that you can share, please send them in. Look forward to that. And I'm going to start my push-ups this Saturday. And I hope to catch up to you real quick. And I want to thank the entire group for a wonderful presentation. Any final thoughts from anybody? Thank you all so much. And take a look at the app. Take a look and just you don't have to do 2,000. You can actually you can watch somebody do them, or you can the guy I play squash with, he does them all in the first week. He's so much fitter and myself. My wife is fitter than myself, so I have to try to catch up to everybody. So I'll keep working at it. I know you will, and I will too. Have a great night, everybody.